Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Maddie here, and welcome back to Meta Monday, the weekly series where we analyze the Pokemon Pocket metagame and keep you guys up to date on everything going on in the competitive world of Pokemon Pocket. Today is going to be one of the most special Meta Mondays that we've done in quite some time. It was the Pocket Mads Pocket Tournament number 6 this past weekend, the largest Pokemon Pocket Tournament in months. I can't remember the last time we had this many people come out and compete. Over 700 players. Of course, it was the first weekend after the release of Mega Rising and all of the new Mega Pokemon. An absolutely incredible turnout. I just want to thank our sponsor, Box.gg, for sponsoring the prize pool of the tournaments. I want to thank all of the players who participated, and I also want to thank the judges, the moderators, and the casters, the massive team that we have going to make this whole thing possible. It really is, a team effort, and we wouldn't be able to do this without all of the incredible people that are involved in the process, from the stream to the tournament to the content, everything that goes into it. Even on the Discord server, it's a massive undertaking, and again, we just wouldn't be able to do this if it wasn't for all of those people that are involved. So I just want to give a massive shout out to all of them, and they handled it very, very well. So many people were competing. It was just such a massive event. It went very well, I will say. But one thing that we have to say here before we get into all of the information and the results of that tournament is that the Pocket Mads Pocket Tournament number 7, being dubbed Mega Mayhem, is going to be this upcoming weekend. That's right. We run these tournaments on a weekly basis, and you guys should definitely go register for the second tournament. Now officially, I guess, the largest weekly tournament series, but the 7th one in the series, in the second tournament of the Mega Rising era. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Link to register down in the description below. Also sponsored by Box.gg with a $250 prize pool. Okay, let's get right into it. So anybody that might be new to our series here of Meta Monday, what we like to do is start off by, highlighting the standings, the final standings, and giving, a shout out to all of the players who, placed very well in these tournaments. And then after that, we dive in and we take a look at all of the top most highest performing deck lists from basically all the entire tournament and the entire weekend. And then at the end of the video, we go a little bit more in depth for some of that metagame data. I would highly recommend that you guys stick around for that portion of the video because it will definitely provide all of the actual context for what the results of the tournament really were. So that's how we do it. Timestamps down in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's dive right into it. We're almost at 40,000 subscribers, by the way. Absolutely incredible. Anyway, all right, let's hop right into it. So this was the final standings of the tournament this past weekend. Froggy X, Narumi, one of the best players in the entire game from France, went 14-1 playing Mega Altaria with the new Star Drop Jirachi. So Mega Altaria did get the W in the first new tournament of this new Pocket era, which is really exciting. Addy 1906 from India went 12-3. He was playing that Mega Absol control deck with Oricorio, with Pichu, with Darkrai. We highlighted it on the channel a few days ago, and I thought that it definitely had a lot of potential given the high amount of fire type Blaziken decks in the metagame. He got second place. Mega Bean from the United States, 11-3, was playing Suicune and Greninja. We'll talk a lot about Suicune Greninja in this video and how I think it is operating in this current new metagame. So shout out to him. CLT Shadow, another great player in the game of Pokemon Pocket from Brazil, 11-3. He was playing Entei Blaziken. Entei Blaziken, the most played deck this weekend by a wide margin. I think a lot of people are pretty hyped about Blaziken. Definitely a couple of placements here pretty high up on the standings, but when it comes to the overall average win rate for the deck list, that might surprise you. We'll talk about it at the end of the video. And then in 5th place here, Jamesio from the United States was playing a Hydreigon based deck list with Mega Absol included, but definitely a deck more focused on Hydreigon, a really, really strong new card. Einstein from Indonesia was also playing the Control Mega Absol here in 6th place. Sharia's Plays, a player who actually won, I believe, the last Pocket Mads tournament, so getting 7th place again. An incredible player, 9-1-3, also playing Entei Blaziken. We had, what is this, Aaron Jamuseum? I don't know how to say the name, from Japan, was playing Ori Ninja. This was another sleeper pick in this tournament. Sudeep from India, a lot of great India players doing really well in this tournament, by the way. Shout out to India. Was playing Suicune Greninja, and then we had more Blaziken here, a couple more Altaria down in the standings, and then definitely some Oricorio-based deck lists. We had Raikou Oricorio, and Pikachu. We had Silvally Oricorio, we had Luxray Oricorio, another Greninja Oricorio, and there was actually Gyarados here in 23rd place. If we go all the way down here to 30th place, we do see an Alolan Executor, which is definitely really strong, but a massive variety of Altaria decks kind of sprinkled all throughout. Top 4 players got prizing, but anybody that made, of course, top 32 or top 16, definitely big shout out to them. And I believe we had almost 80 people make it into day 2. So all of the players that made day 2, massive shout out to all of them. In fact, basically what we can do here is just take a look here at Top Cut Day 2, and these are all of the players that made it, right? So everybody down to D4W, all the way up to Narumi here, these were all of the players that made Day 2 and competed in the second day of competition, so they all had a phenomenal run. Big congrats to everybody. In fact, the diversity in Day 2 was pretty phenomenal. The beginnings of new seasons are really, really fun, right? Because there's less like net decking going on, a little bit more creativity and diversity in the deck lists. I did say before this tournament was actually finished that this, the results of this tournament would likely define the metagame moving forward for this month. And I do think that that has been sort of the baseline that has, been created based off of the results of this tournament. So we'll talk all about it. We have a lot to talk about. Hopefully this video doesn't go too long. But anyway, big shout out to all these players again. Thank you all for competing. Just an incredible performance all around the board in a massive variety of decks. I believe in Top Cut, we had like 40 different archetypes, which is really, really cool. So anyway, let's get right into the deck lists and let's talk about them, okay? Because again, I think that a lot of people are going to be curious about maybe my opinions or just in general some information about all of these top placing deck lists. So at number 1, we have Altaria, the winner again of the inaugural Mega Rising tournament here. And this is going to be Mega Altaria with Star Drop Jirachi and then most notably also the Jingly Noise Chingling, and as well as one of the new Dirty Throw Sableye, which conveniently does deal 70 damage for 2 Psychic Energies, going to be very strong into Oricorio. So the reason why I think this deck list did very well and was a really, really strong choice going into this tournament was, of course, going to be the Jingly Noise Chingling, which literally is just an item lock baby card. For those of you that played the official card game, this is the Itchy Pollen Badoo. It is absolutely incredible. Now, the item lock in Pokemon Pocket, in my mind, was maybe less relevant just because there's only 20 cards in your deck, and most decks really aren't playing that many item cards. So I didn't know if Chingling would be like the best card in the game, but as it turns out, when most people in the tournament are playing Rare Candy, Blaziken, and Entei, Chingling does end up being a very, very strong option here. So one thing to note is that we're not seeing any Giant Capes or Rocky Helmets in this deck list, so there's no damage modifying here. It is basically all about maximum consistency. Star Drop Jirachi is just an incredible card. Not only can it KO one KO baby Pokemon on the bench or the active, but it kind of allows us to finish off KOs. When you kind of factor in the damage from Chingling, a Mega Altaria, and then being able to snipe the bench for 30, it kind of adds up to be enough damage to effectively, sometimes take KOs on Mega Pokemon while they're on the bench. So this Jirachi card is very, very versatile, but it can't stand alone against Oricorio, right? Because it only has 50 HP, and it only does 30 damage. It's really nice as a tool in the deck list, but Sableye here with Dirty Throw really was that inclusion to allow us to just 1-hit KO Oricorios, which I do think helped Narumi throughout probably various different matchups of this tournament. I was unable to make the live stream on Day 2, for unfortunate circumstances, and I apologize for that. I'll guarantee that I'll be here on this next Sunday. But this Sableye card was a really, really smart inclusion. The other card that I've seen some people include here in these Altaria decks is just going to be like one of, if not the new non-EX Altaria card, which can 1-hit KO, an Oricorio as well, right? So if you didn't want to play the basic Sableye, and by the way, Dirty Throw does 70 damage for 2, which is pretty cool. It's got 80 HP, but you'd have to discard a card from your hand in order to use this attack, which most of the time really isn't that big of a deal because it's definitely worth it to get the KO on the Oricorio. This Sableye is a very interesting card, but I think that the interaction with this deck that was very, very strong was 2 in general. So in my playtesting with this deck, I just thought that Mega Altaria was really great because not only you could utilize Chingling, but you were immune to that item lock effect because realistically, the only items in our deck were Pokeball and Red Card, which are not like super mission critical cards to the deck list. We're able to play Copycat. So this is one specific interaction that I'm going to spend some time talking about is Copycat and Red Card, okay? So in my experience, this combo is absolutely insane. There are so many games where my opponent has like 6, 7, sometimes 8 cards in their hand. For us to play Copycat and effectively see like 6 or 7 brand new cards is massive card advantage. But what's funny is that you can play Copycat, gain a whole bunch of cards in your hand, and then after you Copycat and gain all of those cards, you can draw into Red Card and then drop your opponent's hand after you used your opponent's hand to increase the size of your hand. It's an absolutely insane combination, and I think that Lycia is a very, very strong deck as well here, being able to search your deck for, Swablu, or not search your deck, but basically pull out of your deck Swablu, Jirachi, and Chingling, which is really, really strong when you're trying to consistently set up your board state, which I really like. So Mega Altaria just ended up being a really strong Pokemon. One thing that is for sure is that there's not really any metal type Pokemon in the metagame, so having a metal weakness really doesn't matter that much. And 190 HP effectively does operate kind of the exact same as 210 HP does on Blaziken. We're living one hits from basically anything, and we're dealing 130 damage on the top end, which is enough to 2-hit KO basically anything. So that's the big upside here. And again, Chingling allows you to kind of just stall for a very, very long time. Your opponent builds up their hand. Like if you're going up against Blaziken, for an example, you can go into Chingling and just sort of hit, and then go into the second Chingling and then hit again. By that time, your opponent has like a bunch of cards in their hand. And then when Chingling goes down, Altaria is ready to get set up. We go into it. We Mars our opponent down to back to like 3 cards or 1 card in hand sometimes if they KO'd our Chinglings. And then, of course, we're just KOing the Entei, and then they have nothing else to do. So I think that this Mega Altaria deck was built very, very well, not only to counterplay the Suicune deck that was very, very common this weekend, but also into some of the more niche Oricorio archetypes. So very interesting. You know, it's a Psychic type deck that's not really weak to Dark, which is definitely an advantage into Absol. Us living 2 hits is very, very valuable. Sableye can KO. Chingling as well for to go up against rare candy decks. We have Lissia, we have Copycat, we have Cyrus, Sabrina, Mars, so there's space in the deck list. I like Altaria, and I think that, to be fair, the best way to play Altaria is likely going to be able to playing it, to be playing it with other basic Pokemon that provide value here. The other archetype of Mega Altaria, which we'll take a look at later, that I thought did well was the Indeedee variant with like Giratina. I really like that list, partially just because it's also really good into this list specifically, right? Like it's like a counter to the counter. But in Mega Altaria, no surprise in my mind that it ended up winning, just because I thought that it was like the deck that was most well positioned to go up against the 2 most popular decks, which were that Absol Oricorio control deck and then Blaziken, which are of course very strong decks, but Absol and Blaziken didn't have the greatest win rates. Altaria definitely capitalized pretty well. One of the biggest stories here, and one of the best players in the game, playing a very, very smart list, and again 14-1, which is absolutely incredible. Beat basically everything other than one Entei Blaziken, but as you see, he fought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even 6 Blaziken decks overall, which is kind of crazy. And then even beat like 1, 2, 3 Oricorio decks, right? So that's just how well positioned this particular deck was for, you know, those most common matchups, and I really, really like it. So Altaria here definitely looking to be like the early like top dog, which is funny because I don't know if like that many people saw it coming. I was really high on Altaria, but it wasn't really until I saw things like Chingling and Jirachi where I was like, oh man, like Altaria is going to put in some absolute work. So yeah, for sure. In second place though was going to be Absol Darkrai, and by Absol Darkrai I literally just mean Oricorio Absol, like because Oricorio does carry the deck list. So we're going to talk about this, right? Because I made a video on this deck prior to the tournament, right? And I spent a lot of time before the set was releasing really talking down about Mega Absol, which again, to be honest, all of the criticisms that I had about Mega Absol are 100% true, and they were 100% accurate. It just turns out that early on in the season, Oricorio is, of course, a very, very strong option, and the amount of time that Oricorio gives you in a lot of matchups kind of fixes a lot of those issues that Mega Absol has, right? So Oricorio can deal extra tip damage. It can allow you to kind of sit in the active spot for a prolonged period of time. Mega Absol can kind of set up slowly. You can just manually attach to it. You can even set up 2 Mega Absols while Oricorio is in the active spot. And Absol itself isn't a bad card, right? Theoretically speaking, if you have double Mega Absols on your bench with 2 Dark Energies, you're probably going to be in a really strong position to win the game, just by the nature of what that board state looks like. Now, the only way to really achieve that board state is to stall the game with Oricorio. So as it turns out, I think that Absol here pairs really well with Oricorio, and that was really a large bit of the success here. And I think that just really comes down to it, right? I mean, like, you know, if your opponent can't really go through the Oricorio really quickly, and you're able to kind of set up double Absol and get your board state really kind of built up, then it's just hard to deal with, because they're going to chip you down. They can retreat into their second Absol, and you can't Cyrus it back up because they're discarding that Cyrus from your hand. And it really is a punishing interaction. It definitely is a strong control deck, which to me kind of is the only way that we can truly play Absol. And like I said, Absol really does kind of take a backseat here to Oricorio, which is kind of carrying the archetype, but it is a strong back end to pair with Oricorio. The other Absol decks that we're seeing are really just like Hydreigon decks, like Turbo Hydreigon decks, and then Absol's just sort of there, which is fine, and I think that's totally fine. But like I said, Hydreigon really is sort of the core of the other version of the Absol decks. Maybe something else pops up for Absol, but again, all of my criticisms about this card are still 100% true. In fact, I would say really all of the weaknesses of this particular deck come down to the fact that Absol, of course, is a basic Pokemon. You could lead off with it. It requires double Dark Energies to attack. Going first, Absol lead very, very very bad. And then, of course, you know, decks that can just kind of go through Oricorio, they don't really have that much of a struggle against this archetype. So, yeah, I really like this deck. It was uniquely very strong into the Blaziken decks because they don't really have a lot of answers for Oricorio. And then just setting up double Absol on the Blaziken really was quite strong. But as we saw, Narumi's Altaria deck has a Sableye, it's just going to one-hit KO your Oricorio, and then Altaria can kind of handle Absol, right? So that's kind of what this deck is really all about. I do still think it's a strong sort of control deck, Oricorio deck, you know, player in the metagame. We'll have to see. I mean, again, it did get 2nd place, it did get 6th place, so it did do fairly well, as well as 14th place. It was a prominent figure in the tournament this weekend, but definitely, I would say really kind of absolutely getting carried by Oricorio, quite frankly. But it's not a bad card, it's just not nearly as strong inherently as the other cards, so it does kind of rely on Oricorio. Let's take a look here at Suicune Greninja. So this is going to be another really big story for a lot of people. As you see here, this Suicune Greninja deck is playing 0 new cards, right? And I think that Suicune Greninja is still a strong archetype. You got to keep in mind that by far the most played archetype this weekend was Blaziken, right? And those Blaziken decks are fire type. Not only that, but they're actually weak to Oricorio because a lot of them aren't even playing. I think the highest placing Blaziken deck wasn't even actually counterplaying for Oricorio. They didn't have anything in their deck. They were just hoping not to hit it. So when you're playing a deck list like this, which is a water type deck, which is inherently strong into Blaziken, and you're playing Oricorio, you're kind of setting yourself up to be a really well-positioned deck into, of course, the most played deck of this weekend, which was, you know, Blaziken Entei. I mean, that was what everybody was playing. So as we see, all of the decks that did well were specifically strong into that matchup. I think that Suicune Greninja will continue on through this metagame. Now, we'll have to wait and see if it really emerges as like another tier 0, like top deck in the metagame. My assumption here is that Suicune Greninja will just be one of the top players in the game, which is much more healthy than being really the only top player in the game. I think that various different mega evolutions and mega Pokemon strategies are exceptionally strong into Suicune Greninja. And then again, Copycat really kind of has evened out, you know, I should say the strength of that legendary pulse ability. Copycat to me is truthfully one of the most well-positioned cards, or actually one of the best released cards in the history of Pokemon Pocket, right? I think a lot of the big issues that people had over the last couple of seasons was that if you weren't playing these legendary beast Pokemon, you were just so behind on card advantage that you felt at a disadvantage in any of those matchups. Copycat is really the card that they put into the game to balance that out, right? So decks that aren't playing draw engines can play Copycat and effectively, you know, copy your opponent's draw engine there in their massive card size. So a very, very smart, incredible inclusion to Pokemon Pocket Copycat is, and I would recommend that you play it in a lot of decks. But yeah, Suicune Greninja, it's still Suicune Greninja. I will say that there's actually 2 different versions. One of them, instead of the Oricorio here, was actually playing 1 copy of the new Greninja EX, which is actually a strong card in this deck. And the decks that were playing Greninja EX actually had a much higher average win rate than the Suicune decks that were not playing Greninja EX. So that's a very valuable bit of information here. I know this is the highest placing Suicune deck, but the most well-performing version of Suicune Greninja is going to be, I guess the 2 highest placing Suicune decks weren't playing Greninja EX, but we'll just fast forward here to the data real quickly to make my point. If we filter by win rate here, or I guess we'll just filter by meta share, but as we see, there's 2 versions of Suicune Greninja here, one playing EX, one not playing EX, 92 and 61, so a really high record for Greninja EX, and then 69-61, that's only a 53% win rate for the decks that weren't, right? So I would say that Suicune Greninja EX, even though the highest placing deck was only 22nd place, was a much more well-performing version of Suicune Greninja. So that's just sort of the point that I wanted to make there. If you wanted to play Suicune Greninja, I would recommend playing Greninja EX. But let's take a look at the highest placing Blaziken deck, because like I said, this was definitely the hottest deck coming out. What's really funny about this is that not only is this the highest placing Blaziken deck, but this is actually a Blaziken deck that has 0 counters in the deck. There's really nothing in this deck accounting for Oricorio, but we are playing Rocky Helmet and Lily, but it's funny, only 1 copy of either of them, right? So my theory here with Blaziken was like, well, with the burn damage with Rocky Helmet, we could probably get away with not playing any inclusions to counter Oricorio. We would just, of course, play, you know, double Lilies and double Rocky Helmets, and we would probably be fine in that scenario. So, but what a lot of people probably ended up doing was playing 1 copy of the non-EX Mega Blaziken, which does inherently make your deck a little bit less consistent, because it's not really a card you want in most matchups, but it does allow you to just 1-hit KO Oricorio. So this is funny because the highest placing Blaziken deck, in fact, wasn't playing the non-EX Blaziken, and to be fair, that's probably fine. If we take a look at this player's matches, we'll probably see that they didn't play they played 1 Oricorio throughout the entire tournament and ended up winning. Actually, no, they beat this the Einstein deck here, which was playing Oricorio, Absolute Oricorio. So, you know, maybe that's just sort of the case. You know what I mean? Like maybe, I guess maybe this Hydreigon deck was also playing Oricorio. But maybe that's the case, right? Maybe like the Blaziken deck, and maybe it's not really worth, accounting for Oricorio. Maybe you just sort of play your deck and you hope that, it all kind of works out in that sense. But, my thought about Blaziken was that not only was this the most played deck, it was the most hyped deck, but from a face value, like in a vacuum perspective, this deck is exceptionally strong, right? It really is. Entei draws a bunch of cards, Mega Blaziken comes in, it sweeps your opponent, does 140 damage with the Rocky Helmets. It's just a really difficult deck to deal with, very consistent to get set up with Flame Patch. I will say that basically a lot of the other most successful decks of the tournament were built kind of specifically to do well into Mega Blaziken, right? Chingling stops the rare candies. Oricorio is immune to damage from all of these Pokemon. And then, of course, Suicune Greninja also playing Oricorio, but just being a water-type Pokemon, right? So basically, Blaziken and Entei was the meta driver in this opening weekend, and I think that, the results of this tournament were defined by Mega Blaziken, even if it didn't win the tournament, right? So I think that we're probably going to see a pretty steep decline in play after this first week of Mega Blaziken, but it's probably going to end up being a little bit like a Solgaleo, where maybe its results aren't super, emphatic or incredible, but it will likely continue to see a lot of play just because people enjoy the deck. It's a simple deck, and it is, an inherently strong deck list, even though, of course, it does get counterplayed fairly easily by various options in the metagame. You guys liking Meta Monday so far? Comment down below what you guys think. We're going on an absolute rant this weekend. But anyway, that's Mega Blaziken. Definitely a strong deck. And again, a placement here in 4th place, 7th place, 10th place, 13th place, as well as 15th place. These versions are different, but technically those are all Blaziken decks. So even though the average win rate for Blaziken was quite low this weekend, tons of placements here within top 16, and that's just because it saw so much play, and that's just the law of averages, right? So next up, though, is going to be Hydreigon Absol, right? So again, a lot of representation for Absol in here. This is really the one version of Absol, technically, that wasn't, an Oricorio deck. And to be fair, I wouldn't really even classify this truthfully as an Absol deck. It's just sort of a Hydreigon deck list, like a Turbo Hydreigon deck, which, is definitely the core of the deck. I love Hydreigon, and I think it has a ton of potential. Again, it's sort of comparative to like a dark type Rampardos, but the strength here is that sometimes it can just be in the active spot. So I really like this deck list, and I think that if we were to get like a basic fighting type Mega Pokemon with like a Howlucha or something, then we could see a very similar archetype to this, whereas like, you just sort of play, Rampardos in the same type of deck with Cleffa and then that Mega, right? But in this scenario, it's dark type, right? And we have Absol. So I think that Hydreigon's really, really strong. I've seen some people pair it with Sylvie on EX. This deck just pairs it with Cleffa. To be honest, I just think that the possibility of attacking for 130 on turn 2 with Hydreigon is ridiculous, right? For the same reasons that Rampardos is. So I really, really like Hydreigon, and I think that it's going to be one of the premier single prize archetypes in the game right now, which I do think has actually been buffed, right? In a world with Mega Pokemon, being able to do 130 really like quickly with a single prize Pokemon is just a lot. Like there's a lot of damage on the board here. And the other cool thing with Hydreigon is that it can kind of set itself up, which makes it a little bit easier in the late game to commit double energies to Mega Absol to go into it, right? So it's a bit of a different strategy. I will say that, again, Absol, it relies on other strong Pokemon to kind of do most of the heavy lifting. But in the late game, if you're positioned correctly, Mega Absol can be very, very difficult to deal with just because of its effect, right? So if we have something else to do a lot of the chip damage and set up for us, then, Mega Absol can come in and do work. But to be fair, I still, and I'm saying this confidently, I really don't think Absol is that good of a card. It's just not a very flexible card, and it's a fine backline, but it's very weak in the early game, especially going first, and it relies on other cards and other Pokemon to kind of carry through the majority of the game for it, right? Being Hydreigon or Oricorio. Let's fast forward down here. Again, shout out to these players, but let's fast forward to, again, Erinji Museum from Japan, who is playing Orininja. And again, I think that Orininja is kind of like the premier, and yes, we are playing Suicune, but this is like the premier like control deck of yesteryear, right? You got to keep in mind that Oricorio was exceptionally strong this weekend. It's just like how early seasons work. People aren't really, they're not super accountable for Oricorio in the first opening days of the tournament or of the metagame. People just aren't thinking about Oricorio. It's not on the top of their mind, and Oricorio always ends up doing well. So a deck list like this is full on that control Oricorio strategy. In fact, I believe this deck plays dual energy, so Suicune here isn't like always the most useful Pokemon in terms of attacking. It really is just a deck that relies almost entirely on Oricorio and Greninja. Now, you can also play only water energies. In fact, we can actually check this. So, yeah, okay, so this deck was just playing only water energy. So, it's basically Suicune Greninja with just Oricorio being the wall, right? So, traditional Ori Ninja decks were playing dual energies in Giratina. So, this list is playing Suicune, but you're never able to, or you're playing Oricorio, but you're never able to attack with it. It really is just a Pokemon to sit there. And then you're just playing Oricorio Greninja, right? So, you're stalling. It's actually very similar to like the Absol deck, whereas like you really hope that Oricorio can carry you through most of the game, and then Greninja can kind of, you know, control the game down, and then you end up winning. And that's what this deck comes down to. But again, a deck list like this is really smart in the early season, just because most people just aren't really ready to play against something like this, right? When you queue up with like Mega Blaziken Entei and you hit this deck list, you're just thinking like, okay, you know, like, all right, I get it. You know what I mean? Like, so, and I love Mega Blaziken, and I think it's a really strong Pokemon, but like I said, there's things in place already. There's cards in the metagame right now that are popular, that are common, that just beat the deck. They can just sort of counterplay you, which I think is healthy for the metagame. People are going to complain about Oricorio because they always do. I will die on this hill. I say it every time. Oricorio is the most important card in the metagame in terms of, you know, health, for metagame health and metagame diversity. I've explained it before, but realistically, Oricorio stops metagames from being really just a two-facet metagame, which is the best deck and then the counter to the best deck, right? Like that's typically what happens, but when you throw Oricorio into the mix, it creates more of a triangulation in a rock, paper, scissors format, and it makes things a lot more diverse and a lot more healthy. So shout out to Oricorio, shout out to Ori Ninja. Suicune's still a broken card. No two ways about that, whether you're playing Greninja EX or not. It is a bit of a shame because I know people are going to watch this video and they're going to see that, you know, the top 3 Suicune decks were not playing Greninja EX, even though all of the data shows that Greninja EX is actually the better Pokemon to be playing, or Suicune does better if Greninja EX is in the deck, right? So anyway, let's take a look at HVK here, because this was the highest placing Blaziken deck list. That was not Entei, right? So, and I think that this deck list is actually really smart. So instead of Entei, we see Cleffa, and then we are seeing one of the non-EX Blaziken here. And this is a deck that is much more well-positioned to counterplay Oricorio. Not only can Cleffa effectively retreat for free, but it also thins out the deck. So it's similar to Entei, but the thing with Entei is that to get out of the active spot, you have to commit 2 energies to it, which might not be that big of a deal with Flame Patch, but you got to keep in mind that, you know, Chinglings were running around with Altaria, and honestly, if Entei's in the active spot, that means your opponent gets a free, like 3 turns at least with Oricorio, which is really tough. So with Cleffa, you can kind of go into your second turn or third turn a little bit more consistently without sacrificing a 2-prize Pokemon in Entei, which is a very valuable deal here. So I think that this deck is much more flexible and well-positioned to deal with Oricorio, which is why I believe that this version of Blaziken probably had a much higher win rate this weekend. It also is something that's probably a little bit more effective just into Suicune Greninja as well, to be honest with you. Just because, again, Entei is not really the Pokemon you want to have in the active spot, especially going first. It is really bad. You do get to draw the cards, but you're basically just offering prizes to your opponent, which, you know, doesn't feel very good. So, yeah, I like Mega Blaziken. This is the other way that people have been playing it. I've seen some people play it with Sylveon, which sounds interesting, but seems a little bit more overcomplicated than need be. I don't have anything else to say about it, right? It's Mega Blaziken. It's strong. Not only do we have Combusken here, but we also have an alternate Blaziken, and then just Cleffa as the other leadoff option. So, yeah, you know, I mean, I don't really have anything else to say about Blaziken. It's a nice, strong Pokemon, very akin to other fire-type decks of the format. One thing I will say from the very beginning of when Oricorio came into the metagame, that fire-type decks have historically struggled with Oricorio, and now that you know, a water-type deck such as Suicune is so popular, that fire-type, although really strong, and Blaziken's a really good card, there's just a lot of options that you can play to get around that fire-type deck, which I think is good and healthy for the metagame. Let's go down here to this next Altaria deck. This is going to be the alternate version here. Frog EX Babar from France was actually playing, I think, the same list as Frog EX Narumi, so they kind of went in together. 2 incredible players playing absolutely phenomenal deck lists. But this Altaria Indeedee deck list is something that I want to spend some time on, because again, people are going to watch this video and say it was the Chingling version that ended up getting first place, the Jirachi Chingling Altaria version, and that got first place. That's what everybody's going to net deck. That's what everybody is going to play. But keep in mind that the success of that deck was unique to that weekend, and I'm sure that these players, Narumi and Babar, these Frog EX players, will tell you that it was a specifically really smart deck to play this weekend, But given the results of this weekend, the meta share and the decks that are going to see play moving forward will be different, and hence the viability of that version of Mega Altaria will also be different, right? So next up, we're going to talk about this version of Mega Altaria, which in my mind, I think is actually very well positioned to go up against that Jirachi Chingling version of Mega Altaria, which is going to be with Indeedee and Giratina. The reason I like this deck a lot is because, again, into Oricorio, it's really, really good. We have the healing with the Indeedees, which is exceptionally strong, but also to get around the Star Drop Jirachi stuff, to get around Chingling, this is a deck list that can just sort of heal any chip damage that comes at it. If you lead off with Giratina, you can Broken Space Bellow and do some very valuable damage, and then it's just Mega Altaria. We are playing the new Altaria there, the Do the Wave Altaria. I don't even know if this is new. I think it is. This is our play for Oricorio, right? So we're not playing Sableye in the deck. I guess it's up in the air whether or not the non-EX Altaria or Sableye is the better option. They both have 2 energy attack costs. This Altaria is weak to lightning, so theoretically speaking, they're both getting 2 at KO'd regardless. But Indeedee there can heal the active. So since we're not getting hit for weakness, it probably is better to play even Sableye for a deck list like this. I could be wrong, but in my honest opinion, like the Indeedees can heal up a Sableye and then it can live 2 attacks from 2 Oricorios, which is kind of crazy. But regardless, this version of Altaria theoretically should be really strong and should be a good deck into the other version of Altaria, which is why I wanted to mention it, right? Because I think that there's going to be really 2 versions of Altaria that are going to become prominent to the metagame. Of course, the version that got first place and then this version. And I actually think this version going forward might actually even be more well positioned. Mega Altaria is just a very flexible card, which is a big reason why I love it. We're likely going to see it be very relevant for quite some time just because it's going to be strong in the sense that we can build it really however we want to, given what other decks are kind of prominent in the metagame right now. Indeedee can also kind of heal up Greninja damage as well. So there's just a lot of relevancy to Indeedee. Just a really, really strong deck here. And then, the difference here is that we're playing 2 prizers and a 3 prizer instead of a bunch of small 1 prizers, right? So, the Chingling version here can stop Greninja from evolving, which is valuable. But again, you're playing a lot of low HP Pokemon. So if Greninja does get set up, then, it's difficult to kind of deal with that because they're going to be putting pressure on our backline Pokemon. But yeah, as we see here, we see the red card, we see May here, and we see Copycat. So this is a deck here that does not play Lycia because a lot of our basic Pokemon don't have 50 HP. So we're playing double Pokeball, playing 1 May, 1 Copycat, 1 red card. I like this construction. Still 1 Mars, 1 Cyrus, 1 Sabrina, and then double Rocky Helmet. So that's one thing that I really do like about this deck is the Rocky Helmet because it boosts damage, right? In a deck list like this, we're not really dealing a lot of chip damage. We are a little bit more reliant on, Mega Altaria or Indeedee on the front line doing enough damage to KO. So that Rocky Helmet stuff does add up, truthfully. If anything does attack you, it's 20 damage. In fact, what we're likely going to see is that with these high HP Pokemon, Rocky Helmet will inevitably just be a better damage modifying card than playing things like Giovanni or Red, which have a one-time use, right? If our Pokemon are getting attacked more than once, yeah, we would rather play Rocky Helmet than play Red. That's just the nature of how the card is. So we're not going to see a lot of Reds, I don't think, or Giovanni's in the metagame. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. I think that Rocky Helmet is probably going to be the better option there. Rocky Helmet damage plus Mega Altaria is 150, and that's taking KOs, you know what I mean, realistically. So Indeedee's also really cool. The attack is strong, but the Watch Over effect is also strong. This is just a really good Pokemon. I think massively underrated, pairs very well with Mega Altaria. And then, of course, Giratina, because, why not, right? So I love that Altaria version. I really, really do. If we go down here, Jug Life, this is literally a legacy. This is Zero Aura, this is Raikou, Zero Aura, Oricorio with Pikachu and E-Cord, right? I mean, this is the classic. I mean, this is what we were playing week 2 of the A4 season. You know what I mean? Improved now theoretically with May. I do like the deck here. Really, really fun. We get that legendary Pulse ability in play. We get May as well to more consistently get Zero Auras out in the early game, right? If we have a couple of Oricorios or if we have a couple Raikous, then we can kind of swap those for May, get Zero Aura online. This is a deck that has been buffed by May, truthfully, and we are playing 1 copy of Red. This is literally just an old deck that got brought back. It's Oricorio, it's Pikachu, it's Zero Aura. Definitely not a bad deck list. And, I think that Oricorio, again, is just something that'll continue to be strong in the metagame, but this weekend specifically, definitely kind of a uniquely well-positioned card just by the nature of how the game works. In fact, Pocket News here in 17th place had the highest win rate of the entire tournament. Never mind. He had one of the highest win rates of the entire tournament, going 10 and before he ended up losing here in top 32, and he was playing Silvally Oricorio. He was the #1 seed after day 1. Literally, guys, this is just Silvally Oricorio. Again, we have access to Copycat now, which is definitely a pretty unique card here. That is a supporter card that's really good for Silvally, and you're playing Oricorio, and like that's it. Like, I think that Silvally is a really strong card in Mega Rising in this new B1 season because it's a single prize Pokemon. Like, single prize Pokemon do very well. Silvally is sort of the premier, or if not one of the premier single prize attacking Pokemon. No wonder that it was a strong choice of this season. So don't sleep on Silvally. There's nothing new here really other than the Copycat. Do not sleep. He's playing one Copycat, one Gladion, which is kind of crazy to me. Yeah, interesting nonetheless. Silvally definitely a strong card. I guess Gladion and Silvally like probably are equally as consistent, right? Especially into a lot of the Entei's and Suicune. Copycat just did really well this weekend because, you know, again, Suicune, Entei, Suicune, Entei. Like, these are like, you know, Raikou. Like, these are cards that we can definitely use Copycat for, which is definitely really strong. So Pocket News, Silvally or Oricorio. Again, those are two good cards. You put them together, you're probably going to do pretty well. And the next up here, Krypton from Germany was playing Luxray or Oricorio. And again, I think it just comes down to the fact that we're playing a purely single prize archetype. This is a deck that's just very similar to Silvally. Instead of playing like Silvally and Oricorio, we're playing Luxray, which is a stage 2 Pokemon in Oricorio, but we can utilize Zero Aura and Volkner and Elemental Switch, right? So these are like our single prize attackers to pair with Oricorio, whereas with Silvally, it was just Silvally, but a very similar deck. And I think this archetype has been buffed. I like this new Luxray a lot. It's just basically a free 110 damage, which is really relevant with Volkner, and you can just get double energies on this thing super easily. And then we also have the Bench Snipe Luxray, which is a strong card, given that a large portion of the strategies with these mega decks is just attacking and then retreating to the bench, right? So one Cyrus plus one of these Volt Bolt Luxrays is definitely a win condition with a damaged, you know, 3 prize Pokemon retreating to the bench. So I really like this deck, and shout out to Luxray, which has emerged back into the metagame as a really, really decent partner for Oricorio. Lightning type just has so much going for it. There are so many strong lightning type cards. We're definitely going to see a pretty wide variety of them in the metagame moving forward. So next up here, let's talk about Next Time here from outer space. We don't know where he's from the Milky Way galaxy. He went 8-2-1 playing Gyarados. This is the highest placing Gyarados deck in the tournament. People ask me a lot. They were like, where's Gyarados? What's going on with Gyarados? Listen, I think that truthfully speaking, you know, Gyarados is a card that is struggling right now given, you know, the other decks in the format. I mentioned it a little bit, but I think that Gyarados is a card that is very, very good into a lot of the older decks of the previous metagame, right? But it struggles into the other mega Pokemon, the other new mega Pokemon, which is tough because that's what most people are playing. And it's just the nature of Gyarados where it's a little bit more awkward to get it set up and put into the active spot. But it does 140 damage, and it can just sweep through decks unless you're playing a high HP Pokemon, right? So I think that Gyarados struggles into a lot of that. It struggles into Altaria. It'll struggle into Oricorio for sure. It'll struggle into Blaziken, even though it's a water type, just because, you know, you're coming in, taking a KO, and then you're taking the first attack, and there's just nothing you can really do about that. And honestly, like I said, the best way to play Gyarados, truthfully, is, I guess, just to play Misty and Mantike and hope that we get a bunch of energies on. I like the double inflatable boat in case we do lead Magikarp. We don't have to waste energy to retreat into Mantike. We can keep that energy, retreat for free, go into Mantike, get double energies on our second turn. So I like this Gyarados deck. It is a bit of a high roll deck, and like I said, it's not very well positioned into the other Mega Pokemon decks, but it is still a strong card. And there, you know, this deck, this is beating Giratina Darkrai. I'll tell you that for free, even though nobody played Giratina Darkrai. And let's talk about that. Let's give our boy Giratina Darkrai, you know, a bit of a eulogy here because, I think a lot of people understood the writing on the wall, right? When you're playing Giratina Darkrai, you can't win if you're not taking KOs, right? That's just the inherent upside to Giratina Darkrai, is that it can set up 2 strong Pokemon. It takes a little bit of time, but once it gets set up, you're just one at KOing, game's over. Cool, nice, awesome, right? But when Mega Pokemon come out, that's no longer part of the strategy, right? We can't take 4 turns to set up and then not KO anything when Mega Blaziken is coming in hitting for 140 on its second turn, right? We just can't really compete with that. I think a lot of people understood that going into the metagame. Things like Absol discarding supporter cards, you know, Altaria, like basically all of the Mega Pokemon can kind of just body you, and then the game is just over because we can't KO them back, and that inherently does stink. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe Giratina Darkrai comes back, but this tournament it really just didn't do anything. It wasn't in the standings anywhere. So RIP to Giratina Darkrai. This might finally be the time that it is gone. We'll have to see. Maybe it does make a resurgence later in the metagame, but also not a deck that wins against Oricorio either, right? So, you know, that's another facet of that for sure. The last deck we'll take a look at before we get into the metadata at 30th place here is going to be Akuma Z6 from Mercury, from Neptune. He was playing Alolan Executor and Mega Pinsir. So again, let's talk about Mega Pinsir because I think that Mega Pinsir is really, really fun. It is a unique card, and it is a strong card, a bit more flexible than Absol, but the cool thing about Mega Pinsir here is that it has 1 colorless energy in the attack cost. So we can play this with Oricorio and Pichu. We can play this with, Alolan Executor, which this deck was. And I like this deck. I think that personally, Mega Pinsir just probably struggled a bit being a 3-prize Pokemon that could just get KO'd by Blaziken quite easily, right? And that's the thing, right? Everyone's playing Blaziken, or they were this weekend. Playing Mega Pinsir probably wasn't the smartest idea. So it's no surprise to me that the highest placing Mega Pinsir deck was playing Oricorio, because again, how are we going to beat Mega Blazikens all over the place playing traditional Mega Pinsir? I do like the Leafeon build a lot. This is a deck that was very unique, playing Oricorio, playing Alolan Executor again. Just a deck list that was probably uniquely able to deal with some of the fire decks that we're seeing play, because the fire decks were the most common decks this weekend, right? So yeah, Mega Pinsir I think is a strong card, and I think that if Blaziken ends up seeing less and less play as time goes on, which hopefully it does, then I say hopefully, but it probably will. I think that Mega Pinsir will likely have a little bit more room to breathe, which is really, really nice. So yeah, guys, that's the results, right? These were like all of the top decks from the tournament. That's my examples here. There's a bunch of other stuff to take a look at, but we're gonna wait until later in this weekend. This Victory Bell deck, another Gyarados deck here, some Ampharos down here lower in the standings. So there was a lot of really strong decks that made day 2, but again, most people are really only curious in the decks that are placing really at the top, right? So we're going to make a separate video about the decks that did very well, but didn't necessarily get top 4 or whatever. That video will be coming later in the week. And then on tomorrow, we're actually going to be doing our first tier list, which I'm really excited about. It's been a long time since we did a meta tier list, but before this video wraps up, we're already 40 minutes in. I want you guys to comment down below and say, I was here and I'm awesome, because we're about to get into the last portion of this video, which I always tell people is the most useful portion of the video, but I understand that most people don't necessarily stay this long in the video or care that much about it. But we're going to get into the metagame data here. We're talking about win rates. We're talking about conversion rates. We're talking about matchup datas. This is the stuff that inherently gives us a better understanding of what's going on in the metagame. And I say this all the time, but it's the truth, right? Just the final standings, they don't tell us the full story. So here it is. Here is the full story for those interested. Let's dive right into it, guys. And this is the metagame tab, right? So let's break this down. So Entei and Mega Blaziken EX, the most played deck this weekend at a 13% meta share. 13% of the players were playing Entei and Mega Blaziken, but as we see here, 261 to 323. That is a 44.5% win rate. This is a very, very bad win rate for the most played deck in the metagame. But again, it's a little bit of a different scenario, because I think that most people knew Entei Blaziken would be the most played deck, and we had a couple of days before the tournament to build up a counter meta, surgeons, an understanding of what was strong into it, which is why, again, as we see here, Mega Absol and Darkrai, the second most played deck, Oricorio here, basically. This is an Oricorio deck. Almost 11% of the meta share. This was the deck I made a video on. Again, not a great win rate either, 47.5%, 240 to 262. It was a bit higher than Blaziken's win rate for sure, but not the greatest win rate, but it was the second most played deck. And then we see here Ori Ninja, so another Oricorio deck, the third most played deck at only 4% meta share, definitely a decent win rate, 83.75. Luxray Oricorio, so yet another, so literally it was Blaziken, and then all of the other most played decks were Oricorio decks, about a 50% win rate here for Luxray Oricorio. And then we get into the Suicune stuff. So again, I think that there was a smaller tournament where somebody got first place with Suicune the day before our tournament, so quite a few people played it. If you combine Suicune EX with Greninja EX or not, that was 44 people that played it, which actually would have put it amongst one of the most played decks this weekend, and they both had pretty good win rates, right? Greninja EX definitely did a lot better here, 92.61, and then Suicune Greninja was just a little bit above 50% without Greninja EX, right? So definitely strong contenders here, but again, you got to keep in mind, tons of fire, tons of Oricorio. That's the stuff that Greninja and Suicune likes to go up against, right? So coincidentally, and I warned people about this. It was like, and I was scared that Suicune would win the tournament, by the way, because I know people would overreact to that. I was afraid, because I was like, oh man, like everyone's playing fire or they're playing Oricorio. Do we really expect Suicune not to walk in here and be like, hey, let's go. I'm ready for this. Like, this is what I was built for. You know what I mean? People just, again, disrespecting Suicune, assuming nobody would play it. People did play it, and they all did very, very well. So again, keep that in mind. Suicune still a major player here. Will it be the top deck? Who knows? I think Altaria is definitely really strong. And in fact, we see here that not the archetype that won the tournament, but the most played Altaria archetype was the Indeedee version. 60% win rate, guys, 84 and 55. This deck dominated. This was the highest win rate deck out of any of the most played decks in the game, other than, of course, Mega Altaria and Jirachi, which was 68 and 39. That's a 63% win rate. So again, Altaria, these two versions were exceptionally strong. These other two archetypes here, I don't know exactly what they are, but they didn't do as well. So you're either playing this with like Chingling Jirachi, which did extremely well, or you're playing it with like, Indeedees, which also did extremely well. So those are kind of the two early top Altaria archetypes. Again, Mega Jirachi or Mega Altaria and Jirachi ended up winning the tournament, had the highest win rate out of any of the decks here, basically. But I do think that the Indeedee version will is likely strong into this version here, so we're going to see how that works, as time goes on. But Charizard Moltres did see a little bit of play, struggled pretty tremendously. In fact, we do see here that the Mega Blaziken deck without Entei had about a 50% win rate, so actually did a lot better than Entei. Jolteon and Pikachu did struggle a little bit. Some people are asking about Jolteon EX. I thought it was a cool card, but I didn't really have the utmost confidence in it as a true meta contender. Maybe we'll see if that changes, but 28 and 37, so not the best win rate here. If we go down to Charizard Moltres, so Genetic Apex Charizard for those people that were curious, 20 and 51. So just not really a strategy that can contend with a lot of the new Mega Pokemon and the new strategies, unfortunately. So for those of you who are curious, Genetic Apex Charizard with Flame Patch with May, the 200 damage one, it just isn't very good. 28% win rate. So definitely kind of tough. And then we see Mega Leafeon and Pinsir, which was the most played version of Mega Pinsir. Unfortunately, tons of fire in the metagame, went 19 and 29. So definitely not a great week for it. And then the Gyarados decks. Yeah, so I mean, Gyarados struggled. I mean, it really did, right? Mega Gyarados and Mantike here went 9 and 33. Really, really poor win rate. And then Mega Gyarados with just a normal Gyarados. So like if you were playing, I don't know. But that went 19 and 33. Right, so not that bad. Hydreigon. So let's take a look at some of these Hydreigon decks, which performed pretty well. Hydreigon Sylveon was about a 50% win rate. Ampharos was also about a 50% win rate. I think a lot of people just slept on Ampharos, whether people were opening up the Altaria pack or not. I think Ampharos is actually a really strong Pokemon. I would say that, in fact, like against basically everything other than Blaziken, Ampharos is really good. Like that's the only matchup that I think it really struggles with. It's lightning type. You can pair it with some of the more aggressive aggro lightning type Pokemon, and it's a really strong backline sweeper, or you can play it with Oricorio and be a little bit of a slower deck. I think that Ampharos was just massively slept on. One of the more underappreciated cards here. And I think that with the apparent decline in the upcoming weeks of Blaziken, we're likely going to see Ampharos have a much better time in the metagame, which I'm really excited about. So shout out to Mega Ampharos, coincidentally. But yeah, Hydreigon, honestly, a pretty strong card here. The Hydreigon deck with Absol went 23 and 17. These are smaller sample sizes, but it did do fairly well. Meowscarada here went 14 and 18, which isn't that too crazy here, but Luxray did pretty good. Luxray definitely stood out to me. The Dusknoir decks, I tried to tell people Dusknoir probably wasn't the most consistent thing from a tournament perspective. So, as we saw here, Mega Altaria and Dusknoir went 9 and 22. It's just not a little bit of an inconsistent deck. The strategy is very cool, just not something that I would really be extremely high on. And then if we go filter by win rate, we see some random standouts here, like the Silvally Oricorio deck, like Raikou, Pikachu. These are decks that only one person played them, but they did well in the tournament. Same with like this Mega Altaria Galarian Cursula deck. One person played it, went 7 and 3. Silvally Espeon with Altaria EX went 7 and 3, which is interesting. And yeah, like in this victory belt, we'll take a look at these decks in a later video for sure. But yeah, I mean, there you go, guys. That is the overall sort of metagame data, and it's interesting, right? So again, people are going to look at this and say, well, I mean, Mega Blaziken got 4th place. Is it pretty good? It definitely struggled, right? I think the metagame is not very kind to Mega Blaziken. And I think that's kind of the same for Mega Absol. I think that Mega Absol, even though it was kind of all peppered throughout the top of the standings, really wasn't that strong of a deck list. And I think that it was specifically kind of getting carried with Oricorio in its matchup into Blaziken. Its win rate really wasn't that high. But Oricorio decks in general were very good. Greninja Oricorio, really strong. Anything Suicune Greninja is just going to still be really strong in a metagame dominated by fire. When fire decks go down, I don't know if these water decks will be as good, but it does seem to me that Greninja EX here was the better way to play it. So this is the version, or a version, with Greninja EX. We're just taking out an Irida to put in one copy of Greninja EX, so 3 total copies of Greninja. But yeah, that's going to be the Meta Monday, guys. We have a lot to talk about. in the next week or so. Things are going to change a lot. I would recommend that you guys go and play in the Pocket Meds Pocket Tournament number 7. It's going to be a ton of fun. We're going to see the continuation here, the sequel to the largest Pocket Tournament in the last few months. Mega Rising is extremely fun, and again, ranked battles are not out for quite some time, so we have a little bit of time before ranked season begins again, so you should go and compete in the tournaments. I think that it's going to be a lot of fun, definitely a massive success. And again, a big shout out to everybody that played. Big shout out to Box.gg for sponsoring. Shout out to the judges, shout out to the moderators, shout out to the casters, everybody that made this happen. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. Again, just an incredible weekend. Pokemon Pocket is in such a fun state right now. I recently, I wasn't able to make the live stream yesterday for day 2. We just had an unfortunate accident with our family pet, with our cat. He's no longer with us, and it's really tough. So it was a bit of a bittersweet weekend with the incredible event and everything that happened, and then that happening over in sort of my personal world. It really was tough, but I'm just glad that this all went very well, and I feel really happy about the state of Pokemon Pocket right now. I think that the game is exciting, and I think that the players are excited, and I think that the trading update was really, really great. The metagame is really interesting, so stay tuned. We have a lot of content coming on the channel, and I'm really excited to break it all down throughout this week. So again, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you guys later, and yeah. There we go. That's Meta Monday, guys. We'll see you guys later. It's a long one today, but you probably knew it was going to be a little bit long. Let's get out of here. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later.